Welcome to Pera's Playbook. This is your host, Alex Pera. Let's open up our playbook and see who our guest is. Please enjoy. Welcome to episode 139 of Pera's Playbook. Today I'm joined by Kris Roberts. He's an actor who is in Cobra Kai, Secret Society 2 and 3, a new movie called Beach Chain. He's also been in some Jay Wheeler music videos. We're happy to have Kris with us tonight. How's it going?
Going good, Alex. I appreciate you having me tonight, and I want to thank the viewers that tune in.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you on. As I had texted you, and I released to the podcast with the new year, kind of wanted to go in a new direction with the podcast and expand it from just sports to interviewing people from any walk of life. I'm in contact with some other actors and some musicians here, excuse me, for the upcoming, and I just didn't want to be chained down where I was limited on who I could interview. I want to be able to interview anybody and talk about any experience, and I mean they're all applicable to different parts of life, so and interesting stuff, so I didn't want to be kind of chained down to only sports. So happy to have you come on and kind of be part of that beginning here. We'll dive into your acting career and everything, but you mentioned in text that you had a funny football story.
Oh, a few of them. Uh, yeah, there was a time in my young life we grew up between Northwest Pennsylvania and Southwest Florida. I had an older brother, 4 years older than me, and he joined football, Pop Warner football, intramural, and I had begged my mother for weeks to get me into the Cub Scouts. Okay. So finally, mom pulls the trigger, gets me into the Cub Scouts, and I go to my first Cub Scout meeting, Alex, and the guy on stage, I mean, that was doing the assembly, his socks were like above his knee. They were red and green woolly socks. He's wearing these 70s top style shorts, and I wasn't really feeling the vibe, but I grew up hunting, fishing, this, that, and the third. So it was almost my nature to be, you know, the joke was I did enough Cub Scouting when I was living with my dad. But anyway, I remember coming home from that first night of Cub Scouts, my brother returning from his first night of football practice. And as I looked at him and seen he was all, how you look after a good grueling, time in the trenches of practice. I looked at that and I recalled that gentleman on the stage, and I was like, so all of a sudden I wanted to play football, Alex. So here, mom just jumped through all the hoops to get me into Cub Scouts, and after the first night, I was ready to play football, and that's what began my football career into junior high school.
That's funny. You had your heart set on the Cub Scouts, and then, well, that's how it is with kids sometimes too, though, right? I mean, and older siblings. I'm an only child, but I know from friends and stuff, they always wanted what their older siblings had. You're jealous, and whatnot. Um, so you always wanted to outdo your siblings too. That's the vibe I've gotten from people is if your sibling does something and you want to come along and do it twice as good.
Well, my brother's a millionaire, so maybe I could do that twice as good.
Yeah, there you go. So let's dive into how you got into acting, and like when you were younger, was it something that you ever thought you'd be doing, or was that something you enjoyed when you were a kid, or did this come later in life that you're like, hey, I want to start acting and getting into that?
Well, as I recall, it's kind of funny you mentioned as a kid. You asked as a kid. I recall. I think I was maybe 6 or 7, and we'd go out to eat at like family restaurants. And I recall going into the bathroom, and I'd lock the door, and I'd begin to belt out Popeye the Sailor Man at the top of my lungs, Alex. Oh. I swear the whole restaurant, you could hear a pin drop as my mother came and yanked me out of the little boys' room and all the way back to our table. I was performing my little heart out at like 6 and 7 years old. So, and then I shared briefly about my teen years was actually probably some of my greatest acting performances to date. Um, I found myself in some wayward ways with crowds that I shouldn't have been in, and I acted at that point in my life. I acted however it was fitting for me to gain acceptance. Because I grew up a bullied kid, really bullied, severely bullied, some childhood trauma. I got hit by a car when I was 3 years old. So I had an eye patch, I had false teeth, and I was a little fat kid. So if you could only imagine, I was always the object of everyone's ridicule. I was picked on, I was bullied. So when I found myself in my young teen years, I didn't know who I was. I had an identity crisis, having moved from Northwest Pennsylvania to Southwest Florida into the middle of a kind of a middle class neighborhood on the outskirts of a ghetto. Long story short, the bullying became intolerable. Saying all that to say, I remember in those years acting as crazy as I could, as tough as I could, just to survive, if you will. So it's always been, I'm able to, and now in the acting, I'm able to create a character. That's some of the best thing about acting, in my opinion, is the ability to create the character based upon how production wants to see it, and B, how I can channel my energy into that, creating that character. But getting back a little bit off topic there, in 2019, I was on the internet and I came across an application for background work for a Netflix film that filmed in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. If you haven't seen Sweet Girl on Netflix, please check it out. Excellent film, starring Jason Momoa. So that was my first experience. We filmed at PNC Park in Pittsburgh, and we also filmed on the Roberto Clemente Bridge. It was November, Alex, and it was 30 degrees. The wind chill had it down into the lower 20s. It was cold, but here I was, and granted, my first film experience wasn't an independent film. It wasn't like a small town playhouse theater, gig. My first experience was on a Netflix set. So shout out to Netflix. Kris Roberts loves you. Um, it was like stepping right into the kingdom. You know, at that point, Alex, I realized this was something I wanted to pursue the rest of my life. That I just passed a milestone, starting pursuing in 2019 November. This past November has marked 5 years that I've been active in the film industry to one degree or another, whether it be independent films, commercials, music videos, TV series. Uh, so, saying that to say, in 2019, it was shortly after that, about a year and some small change after that. I remember talking to my coworker, David Flieger, appreciate you, Allegheny Toyota, Franklin, Pennsylvania. And we were standing outside in the snow, and I just looked over at my coworker Alex, and I says, "I'm going to Florida to make movies." And I mean, the rest is kind of history. That 5 years, it started with that single step, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a small thing either. It was a major life change. So I don't want to get off topic, so I'm gonna snip it short, and we can get more into that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we can di definitely dive into um well, we can kind of go into some of that now here. I saw you had a post on Instagram. It kind of said like you had some people that were, thinking about going on a Netflix show as a background actor, and they were like, "Well, would it be worth it?" And your post was like, "Hey, I'm standing right behind Terry Silver in Cobra Kai. Like, yeah, I think it's worth it." And I would say the same thing as like an outside looking in to take any of those for one, the experience, and then just kind of building blocks in your resume. It's like with any job, I mean, it all adds up on your resume eventually. All the little background roles you do are gonna build up. And then I would imagine networking too. If you do a background role for somebody and then, hey, maybe they've got another film and they've got a role they think you'd be good in, and it all kind of builds from there. So I know we kind of dive into that as it seems like a good segue. Talking about that background role. I mean, I'm sure there's people out there who are considering acting, and I don't know if I should go for it.
Absolutely. I'll never forget it, Alex. In fact, that morning I had just onboarded with Cobra Kai. Um, I had to take a week off of work. I had to make all these sacrifices to be able to go and film. I'm in Gainesville, Florida, so I'm 5 hours away. I'm just laying the groundwork to kind of blueprint some of the prices you pay. So took a week off of work, which means no income aside from what I make in Atlanta, 5 hours away. You have to pay travel, accommodations. So it is a legitimate question. Is it worth it? That day, I remember getting the day in question. I remember getting two Facebook messages from two young ladies, actresses in the Florida film industry. Is it worth it? And I sat there and I pondered the question. And as I read, is it worth it? I understood. I understood that feeling of, is this really worth it? It's just a background role. Okay. So before I answered it, like I said, I went through those channels in my mind, and then a light bulb flipped in my brain, and I with as minimal keystrokes as possible, I says, "Have you ever been on Netflix?" That pretty much answered the question, if you will.
Yeah.
Like I said, I was fortunate. My first opportunity was on a Netflix set. However, saying that to say, the build up to such an opportunity, it would be a beautiful thing as well. Um, I want to take a moment and shout out a friend of mine, Sean Thompson, down here in the Florida film industry. This will go right into the networking aspect. Uh, Long story short, I did encourage those young ladies to absolutely go for it. This is Cobra Kai. This is one of the hottest things on TV right now. Whether to just be there is priceless. You understand?
Yeah.
It was a phenomenal experience. Anyway, back to where I was at. Sean Thompson, we celebrate one another. We try to. I mean, we all have our differences and this, that, and the third, but we always celebrate each other in the industry. We always lift each other up in the industry. So when I was celebrating with Sean, congratulating him, 3 days later, I get a message from Sean with a link for casting, cab casting, Atlanta, Georgia. I just want to thank you guys. I shot an email to them, you know, and it was like a shot in the dark to me, Alex, because I realized there was probably thousands of people wanting to get on the show. So you feel somewhat insignificant Like you go through these things in your mind. Am I going to get picked? Of course I'm going to get picked. And then the next day you might be like, oh, I'm never going to make it. Oh, they're not going to call me. There's so many other people that they could use. I'm in such a massive pool of people. Then the phone rang. I was on my way home from work. It was 3 days after I submitted, and mind you, like I said, I was going through those ups and downs of wondering, am I going to get there? Oh my goodness, I'm going to get there. And then all the way back down, like I don't stand a chance. So when that phone, I was driving home from work, and every day now going through that intersection, I kind of get a butterfly or two, thinking back. The phone rang. I'm driving. I don't encourage being on the phone while you're driving. Dangerous. I looked at the caller ID and it said Atlanta, Georgia. And I knew at that point, because the casting company is in Atlanta, I knew at that point that was the phone call I had waited the last 3 days so anxiously to receive. So I picked up the phone. Well, I clicked. I didn't pick it up. I pick up the phone and I hear mumble, mumble. It was kind of broken up, because I was traveling through a bad area. And I says, "Is this about Cobra Kai?" And she says, "Yeah, yeah, woo, woo." And I'm in heaven. I'm on cloud nine, Alex. I'm a movie star all of a sudden in my mind. I'm like, "Oh, I made it." So throughout the call, it broke up a few times, and I was beside myself because I thought I dropped the call. So I was like, "Oh, you still there?" Yeah, she's still there. She's like, "Hold on a minute." And I hear her discussing something with somebody in the background. And she came back on the line, Alex, and she says, "Today's your lucky day." What it was, they had me in mind for a specific role. And at the last minute, they decided to kind of upgrade my role, if you will. Not saying every role is significant. There's no big role. Everybody's significant on the film set. But they did put me into a role which afforded me more of a character, if you will, as French sensei for Team France. When she said, "Today's your lucky day," I was thinking to myself, "Ma'am, if you only knew. I've been waiting for this moment." You know, rewind all the way back to 2019 when I took the leap, or 2000, early 2020 when I finally moved to Florida, back to Florida. Everything just seemed to come full circle at that moment. It was like, oh my gosh, I'm going on Netflix, and that was part of my email. I sent them a really casting directors don't generally read; they look at pictures. You see, so I sent this little sappy email in hopes that it might get read, along with my headshot and my resume. What of a resume I have, and I said, "Look, I've worked on a Netflix project before. In fact, it was the very first project I ever worked on. I would love to work with you guys again." So there were so many facets of significance to this opportunity, you see. So going all back to my lady friends, the actresses, you know, it just goes to show it's sometimes it's yeah, it's a background role. Case in point, I was watching some reels on Facebook earlier, and here sits Steve Harvey. Shout out to Steve Harvey. Terry Crews. Shout out to Terry Crews. And they're cutting up about their first interaction on a film set, which so happened to be a Burger King commercial. Steve Harvey looked over at Terry Crews. "Yeah, you were just an extra." I just heard that earlier. And William Zapka, shout out to William Zapka, Sensei Lawrence, oos. Anyway, I heard William Zapka say on set, "There's no such thing as a small role." You know, So kind of getting off the beaten trail. But yeah, the experience's background is essential, I believe. Sometimes it gets a bad rap for people trying to break out of a background into an acting because, see, there's a lot of things that you do as a background actor that really don't carry any weight in the acting industry. You know, it's not. Example, it's not a supporting role. It's not a lead role. Odds are there's not going to be any dialogue, so it's almost viewed as like a notch below, if that makes sense. And that's not in a derogatory way. And I read it just the other day. The background role has a lot more to do with the set prep than it actually does the script, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So until you, and I'll be honest with you, Alex, and I know I'm a very unorthodox person. So when I was on set of Cobra Kai and I looked at the assistant to the assistant director, and I was like, "Hey man, let me have a line. Let me say something." You know, I eat, live, and breathe now trying to get dialogue on film. And mind you, the experiences of being in a background role add up. You understand? What I mean to say is, like you mentioned earlier, it's a building block. It's part of the portfolio. At the moment, I've had no formal actor training. However, I've been privileged to work with actors. I'm that type of learner. If you put me in the environment and allow me to watch, and another benefit of being in a background, just being on a film set, period, whether you're cast, crew, or what have you, you get that privilege to have that front row knowledge or that front row instruction, if you will. So yeah, I would encourage anybody that's even given it an inkling of a thought to run with it. Um, it does, in fact, require quite a sense of adventure. Like I shared earlier, there'll be times you'll have to sacrifice. And I've had to turn down roles, Alex. This is a good one. I sometimes I still wrestle with this one. When I booked Cobra Kai, the boss, the job. See, I'm a contract auto detailer, so I basically make my own schedule. Even though I work for a dealership, I'm independent of that dealership, so I can do my own thing. But at the same time, they're kind enough to say, okay, we can live without you. Come back when you're done, whatever. So it was there was a cell tower interruption the morning. It was like 2 days after I made all my agreements with work, begin to make accommodations in Atlanta, and it's my agent. She's like, "We're trying to get a hold of you," and there was like some cell tower problems. So I was able to get incoming messages, but I wasn't able to correspond or reply. So I'm like, I'm reading, and she's like, "Get a hold of me ASAP." So I'm like, "Holy cow, what's going on?" You know, there's a role available in Miami. Now, mind you, Atlanta's way up here, and Miami's way over here, and here I am in Gainesville, Florida, right in the center. So I finally, not only is my agent trying to reach me, at this point, a casting director is calling my phone personally. And I finally asked my boss, I was like, listen, my phone's going haywire. I can't use it. It won't operate, but I'm still getting these messages and I'm reading them, but I can't respond. I said, let me borrow your phone. So I takes his phone and I dial my agent's number. And she's like, Kris, I have a role for you to be a stand in on Bad Boys 4, Alex. Mind you, while I'm conversating with my agent, I'm eyeballs to eyeballs with my boss. And so I hang up with my agent, and somehow or another, the phones came back online, and my phone rang, and here it was the casting director of Bad Boys 4, Alex. And I'm still looking at my boss. And while this gentleman's speaking in my ear that he needs me in Miami, 5 hours to the southeast from where I'm at in Gainesville, that day for fitting to film on set the next day or two, whatever it took, I'm looking at my boss and I'm thinking, do I need to just quit my job and go do this film opportunity? It was really pulling at my heartstrings because you don't turn down stuff like that if you have any opportunity or any ability, you go for it. This is what happened. Saying all that to say, I had booked Cobra Kai already. I had already made arrangements with my job. So it just wouldn't have been the right thing to do to say, hey, you guys just gave me a week off graciously, you know, everything they did for me, to just look at them and say, well, by the way, I'm leaving for Miami today. Sorry, guys. So I had to decline. And months later, when the trailer came out for Bad Boys 4, I was watching the trailer. And when my agent had me booked for a stand in role. So they'll send you a picture of who you need to look like and what the wardrobe's going to be like, etc. And it was a real loud wardrobe, and I seen what I thought was the exact wardrobe my agent sent me. So I rewound it, and I knew what the role was, but it was just really cool to see the exact wardrobe that my agent sent me in the trailer. And it was, in fact, the captain. So I was going to be a stand in for the captain on Bad Boys 4 within days of. So, saying all that to say, I was already on cloud nine to travel to Atlanta to film Cobra Kai. I mean, untouchable, man. Sky high. I was just beside myself excited. So it made it less of a sting, but at the same time, sometimes you're in tight spots in the industry. People have jobs, people have family obligations, and you oftentimes can't just pack up and go do something. And that was an example of that kind of, you know, living check to check, had already sprung off a bunch of cash for the accommodations and the trip to Atlanta. I didn't have the time or the resources to do them both. And that was a hurt piece that I still deal with. But at the end of the day, the takeaway is there's opportunities everywhere.
Right. And you still got to go on to a major TV show, one of the hottest TV shows. I mean, obviously, it would have been cool to be a part of Bad Boys 4 too, but you're on one of the hottest TV shows Netflix has to offer, and just kind of in general right now. I mean, Cobra Kai is where it's at. Everybody's just salivating, waiting for the final season because I mean they left us on like the cliffhanger at the Sekai Taikai. I mean, Cobra Kai is the kind of show that I'm watching it with my wife. I mean, we can't stop. And we don't want to burn through it all in one day. You kind of want to try to drag it out as long as you can, but at the same time, you watch it. What's going to happen next? I'm so pulled in. I mean, they did a masterful job with Cobra Kai, top to bottom. It's a phenomenal show. Um, the actors, I mean, you got a nice blend of the old story and the new story. You got something for fans of Karate Kid, and you've got something for people who never watched Karate Kid. I guess with that being said, were you a fan of Karate Kid or Cobra Kai prior to being on the show?
I most certainly am a Karate Kid fan. I have to be honest, Alex, out of respect for the true Cobra Kai fans. Uh, I don't, believe it or not, I don't watch a lot of TV. I'm a movie guy. So, I mean, I did watch a couple episodes here and there. Uh, However, saying that to say, being a Karate Kid, I grew up in the '80s. Karate Kid was my jam. You know, uh, so again, out of respect to the true Cobra Kai fans, I can't necessarily say I was a fan. I never really took the time to sit down and watch the show until I got casted, and at that point, I like to think by the graces of Cobra Kai Nation, as a Karate Kid fan, I kind of got grandfathered in with the gray hair. Uh, Saying that to say, I want to give a big shout out to the Cobra Kai Nation, Cobra Kai fans. I mean, they're the greatest fans in the world, obviously, and it is the greatest series in the world, obviously now. Uh, so yeah, Karate Kid. Being on set, being an '80s kid, and there was a lot of us. We were all there. I'm not the only person that has experienced this surreal feeling about it. I mean, case in point, excuse me. I remember we were filming takes, and on a film set, you spend a lot of times 13, 14-hour days. You're going to hear action, you're going to hear reset, you're going to hear back to one, you're going to hear still rolling, and you're going to hear it over and over and over and over again until they get the shot. So anyway, saying that to say we were filming a certain scene, and it was a very involved scene. I mean, there was a lot of action, obviously, at the Saikai Taikai. And I remember, Alex, that surreal feeling. The surreal feeling of being involved in the Miyagi verse is still there. It's going to be there. Cobra Kai never dies. So anyhow, I remember during one of the takes, Alex, I looked over my shoulder and there's Ralph Macchio. Shout out to Ralph Macchio, Daniel Russo. Uh, I can't explain the feeling I felt in that moment, and it got even better because as you know, during the take, you'll keep anyway. As I looked over, I seen an opportunity to get closer to Ralph, so I took it. And we're on set, we're working, we're professional people. Uh, there's no room for like fanboy while you're working. But I seen an opportunity, and as we walked, we got kind of close to one another. We looked eye to eye, and it was almost an automatic. We both reached our hand out for a handshake, and I remember looking my one of my childhood idols in the eye and saying, "Thank you for framing my childhood." And with a big grin, bro, he looked back at me and he said, "Thank you for being here." And I couldn't have thought of anywhere else in the world I'd rather been at that moment. You understand?
Yeah.
So just so surreal, man. And now after the experience, I enjoy, like I said, the true Cobra Kai fans that paved the way. I enjoy following them, celebrating with them. You know, because again, of course, I'm a huge Cobra Kai fan now, being grandfathered in through the Karate Kid universe. Um, it's an adventure watching them go to like Comic Cons, meet and greets, and get that same chance I had. I love it, man. I love watching it. I love, like I said, man, the Cobra Kai fans are beautiful. I love seeing them interact, being on the red carpet with cast and crew, and just to know that I'm a part of something so big. Sometimes, I mean, and then that voice will come along every once in a while. Oh, you're just an extra, or this or that. And granted, Every part is very important on set. I was just happy to be there, man. You know, whether I was able to have dialogue, it would have been great. But I was in some pretty intense action scenes that I'm grateful for. Um, I recall filming in the spring. We were filming the Saikai Taikai, and I was standing beside a character that no one knew. You know, everybody was like, "When's Silver coming back? Is Terry Silver coming back?" And I'm sitting there for months, man. I'm like, "Oh my god!" I was like, "Ugh, I can't say nothing to anybody." I stood right beside him. I worked with him, you know, and I'm watching the buzz in the Cobra Kai Nation, and I'm just like, these guys are in for such a treat, you
Yeah,
know, because it was just such phenomenal writing, phenomenal acting. Man, I can't express how inspirational it was to watch those guys. And you know, let's not forget this was a final season. You understand? And
hmm,
as filming began to wind down, brother, I've seen these people, their family, they've been together, they're on this ride, you know, the writers, the directors, cast and crew alike, you know, and I was so honored to be a part of that. So honored to be in that, to experience that, to feel that presence that they all, you know, they knew that this was it.
yeah,
And I even overheard one of the assistant directors, you know, what are we going to do next? You know, this has been the last 7 years of our life, and just seeing that looming over. I mean, I think it even made their performances better, man.
right. You see that a lot with long-running TV shows, the final interviews. I'm a huge MASH fan and a huge Big Bang Theory fan, and they both had really long runs. And watching interviews of the cast members, that's one thing, they kind of talk about is this is our and Harry Potter, that's another one, because they grew up together. That one
Sure.
literally from being young kids to young adults. And I mean, that's work every day. And I mean, none of us as fans can really understand that feeling because most of us we start working a job and you keep working that job and you keep going and maybe you get a new job, but it's not the same level of family as you would have when you're on set with somebody like you said 14, 16 hours a day every day for 8 months straight and you're putting this product out. You've got that feeling of, wow, what's next? Especially when it is a major TV show like Cobra Kai or any of the ones I named. I mean, you're part of this huge thing. It's hard not to question in your mind, like, well, if I'm up here, what if I go down after this? Like, can I keep going up? I mean, there's always the doubts in your mind. And a lot of the actors in Cobra Kai have done other amazing things. A lot of the young actors have been in a lot of Netflix productions, other big movies. So they're doing quite well for themselves, and they'll be fine after Cobra Kai. And same with the actors from the other movies, I said. But yeah, when you've got that guaranteed, I know I'm coming back next year. I know what I'm going to be doing. We've got another season to shoot. Gets a little scary, I would imagine, when now it's like, what's next?
That's a great observation, man. When as you were speaking, I was thinking about, you know, after we filmed a total of 5 weeks in Atlanta, and it was split. You know, sometimes there was a 2 week turnaround, but most times only a 1 week turnaround. Meaning, we'd go film 5 days, come home for maybe a week, and then return for another 5 days. Um, Being in that action-packed environment for even such a short period of time compared to the run the cast and crew have had, I know coming home from some of them 4 and 5 days on set, and all of a sudden being back to the norm, there is and a lot of actors and actresses experience it as well. It's almost like a withdrawal from set life.
Yeah.
Now, you team that with, it's a Netflix production. There's phenomenal fight choreography going on. The pulse is high, the action is there, and then all of a sudden you take that away. Saying all that to say, I can only imagine what it must be like, realizing that, hey, this is it. What I experienced was a short term thing. These guys have done this for years, so it's like it's kind of apples to oranges, but just to give you an idea that after you leave that set, you can't wait till what's next in this
Right.
in this life. You're and it's funny because I was reading the rundown of the podcast, and the last question was, "What's next for Kris D. Roberts?" And to be honest with you, Alex, that was a couple of days ago. I was looking at it. Kris D. Roberts didn't have anything next. You see, but that changed, and it's
Yeah.
funny because that's how it works sometimes. You'll find yourself going through, and the mental challenges of being an actor or trying to become an actor. It's a tough business. It's a tough industry, and I'm probably like middle of the road. I'm probably not as committed as I should be, and that's going to change. But anyway, saying that to say, um, it's always that feeling of, what am I going to do next? Is there going to be something next? So you continue to network. That's where you put your network. Your network comes into play because there's been productions I've aided in casting. Uh, Secret Society 3, uh, not so much Secret Society 2. I think I did bring a couple actors along on 2, but the year later when we filmed Secret Society 3, I did have the privilege. I think I had the privilege to assist in casting 4 or 5 Florida film actors. So it's that network, Alex, that keeps us encouraged. Constantly interacting online with fellow actors, and it's life, man. Sometimes you grow apart, sometimes you go different directions, and then you meet new people. It's the circle of life. It drips over into this film thing. It's the whole. If I spend a lot of my time networking, knocking on doors, meeting new people. And the thing about it, Alex, is I'm not a super social. I'm not a super outgoing person, but I still make connections and I still get to know people. And I find myself going, something always pops up when I apply myself, and that's the thing. It's one day at a time for me, Alex. I get up and just like anyone else, I strive to have the best day I can. I strive to be the best I can. So I take that energy and apply it to the film industry as well. Looking to book roles, looking to book opportunities, and it seems when I bring that energy to the table every day, when I bring that 110%, something always manifests. And good stuff. And in fact, I've watched it go from good, better to best. Like this is the best opportunity I've ever had with Cobra Kai. You know, but that didn't happen overnight. So again, I encourage people that may struggle with, is this what I want to do? Is this, I want to do this, but blah blah. Whatever the case may be, I encourage them to, you know, give it that shot, give it that energy, and that's the whole thing. It's the law of attraction, Alex. If I'm putting my energy out there, it's going to attract it to me. So, I just continue to just keep seeking opportunities, like I say, networking, meeting people, and putting myself out there. And that's another thing. You got to be vulnerable in this thing. You got to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
But at
I
the same,
I was gonna say I experience on a much different scale, obviously, but similar emotions with the podcast here. When I have guests, I'm often thinking, okay, now who am I going to get next, and what can I do next? And um, I feel the same way. Like, you're talking about being on cloud nine when you land a certain part. I feel that way when certain people answer me. If there's somebody that I reached out to, part of a movie that I'm a huge fan of, or a sports team or something. I mean, I get super excited about, oh, I can't believe that person. They're gonna come talk to me. Um, and yeah, it's totally all networking. And I mean, I've reached out to people. I'm like, this person's probably never going to answer me. And maybe they're going to think, who's this kid and what does he want? And some of them do say no, and some of them never answer. But then when you get the ones that do say yes, it makes up for all the no's. So I feel, obviously, like I said, on a different kind of scale, but similar emotions myself with what I've got going on here.
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, I was just listening while you were speaking, and something resonated with me about networking. Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Have you interviewed professional football players ever?
Yeah.
How was that feeling? Was that like, because I'm sitting here thinking to myself, how could I feel and understand and relate? So, in other words, you probably started your podcast maybe with not such significant guests. Am I correct?
Yep.
And you worked your way up,
Yep.
just like I explained how I did in acting. So tell me, how did that feel? You that's that surreality probably that experiencing that.
Yeah, I thought it was at the time, and some of them they didn't have long careers. Maybe they were in the league for 6 years on and off playing. They weren't starters. They're not household names that people would know. But I thought it was the coolest thing. I was like, oh, this guy played in the NFL and he's talking to me, and well, he knows all these other people. And you keep growing. And when I finally did get one, um, it was one of I had a great time interviewing him. Don Beebe. He played for the Buffalo Bills and the Green Bay Packers. He played in five different Super Bowls because he was with all the ones that the Bills lost there in the 90s. That was so cool. I was actually talking to this guy that played in five different Super Bowls, and he caught passes from Jim Kelly and Brett Favre and all this stuff. And I have the same kind of feeling about a few actors that I'm in contact with here. Hopefully, that'll be on the podcast in the coming weeks. Some of the movies they've been in, where I was just so thrilled when they answered me. Um, so yeah, it is that surreal feeling like, oh, well, I'm talking to this person that I've watched on TV. This person that's done all these amazing things, and here I am. I work at a high school, and I'm having a conversation with them.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's cool. Um, well, can you tell us a little bit as we wrap up about? I know you posted a little bit about some conversations you had about something that's next, and I know that oftentimes you can't say too much. Um, but like you mentioned a few days ago, you didn't know what was next, and now there's something kind of in the works. So I don't know how much you can say.
Sure. I could give a brief intro to what's been going on in my life with as far as that's concerned. Like I mentioned earlier, 2 days ago, the opportunity I'm about to speak on, wasn't present. It wasn't present, Alex. But that didn't stop me from pursuing, and that's the whole thing. It wasn't present until I made it present, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I sent the energy, I sent that energy out to get it. So anyway, yeah, I just 2 days ago, I was signed with a film studio here in Florida. Um, and I received my first lead role. So, you know, it's all coming full circle, man. 5 years ago, when I started as a background guy, I had no idea that I would be signing with a film studio in Florida to begin a web series that will likely we're going to seek out some pretty big platforms, and to be able to be a part of something at the ground level, you know, I couldn't ask for a better opportunity, Alex. And like I said, 2 days ago, it wasn't there.
Right.
You know, what what brought it to fruition is everything that led up to them 3 days ago. You see, um, the the owner of the studio, the owner of the production company, they came across some of my work, Alex. That sometimes I just throw it out there and throw it out to the universe. And a lot of times people will come across your work and reach out to you. And again, not being as organized of an actor as I should be, or this, that, or the third, whatever the case, not paying enough time committing myself to this vision. Sometimes I feel like it goes back to that feeling of, oh my goodness, I'm amongst so many people that are more qualified, whatever, you know, and it's just out of nowhere an opportunity, an email, a Facebook message, saying, hey, and I'll quote the guy. He said, Mr. Kenneth, he said to me, he says, because I'm expressing to him, I'm sorry, I don't have this, that, or the other. I'm a little, because like I said, I don't have a bulletproof, like a beautiful resume. I need to work on some things. But working with what I do have, the he said to me, he says, that's okay. He says, I feel in my spirit this role's for you. You know, and sometimes that's just how it works, man. Sometimes people will be in your network or be introduced to your network, and all of a sudden something flourishes. You know, I just watched Adam Sandler. Shout out to Adam Sandler. I watched him receive a big award. It started basically when he left SNL and it started his own thing. He brought his network with him, man. So here I am saying that to say I've been welcomed into Seven Crazy Cat Studios in Florida on a ground level web series. And like I said, I can appreciate the gentleman that reached out to me because his vision, and that's another thing. You got to have vision. I can appreciate somebody's vision. If I can spend 3 minutes of my time conversating with you about your vision, I'm gonna back you 100%. You know what I mean? Especially if your vision includes me. So yeah, I remember reading the rundown of the podcast, and I was kind of gripped with fear. I was like, oh my God, what's next? I was like, and it's a stark reminder, everybody listening, any film industry worker, I mean, from set work, from cast to crew, everybody understands that what's next feeling. So that was probably the highlight of the last couple of days was knowing that I went from not having a what's next to having a beautiful what's next. So that, you know, one of the main things to deal with is rejection because you're not going to get every role. So I'm babbling, but what I'm saying is it's always that what's next. You know, saying that though, you continue just because it doesn't look like anything's there yet. You still continue because it's up here. It's in here. It's in the heart. It's in your mind. It's in your soul. So it's almost like you be patient and you let it go and you continue to throw seed out there. And next thing you know, the seeds start sprouting up here, there, and everywhere. Like I said, Cobra Kai, Bad Boys 4, same week, you see. So what's next? What's next for Kris Roberts? apart from that, hopefully much more, Alex.
Yeah, sky's the limit, right? I mean, you keep building your way up. It starts with one lead role and then it keeps going. Obviously that's the goal. And obviously exciting. And the same is true for me and like my podcast with the networking. If I get one guest on, um, I just had Tom Paulino on. He's an actor. He's been in a variety of he's been in episodes of Blue Bloods and FBI Most Wanted, a lot of those types of shows and various movies. And I reached out to another actor that had been in a movie with him and said, "Hey, I'd really love for you to come on the podcast. I just had Tom on. I know you guys work together." And he responded and said, "Oh yeah, I'm great friends with Tom, and now we're in contact. Hopefully, I'll get this guy on the podcast." But if I didn't know Tom, would I even be talking to this actor right now? So I feel like that networking, it's so important, and you never know when one connection is going to lead to another, and it might not lead to anything for 5, 10 years. You get that way down the line, and then it's like, oh wait, that connection I made a long time ago, that is going to mean something. So exciting stuff for you with your lead role. Excited to kind of follow your journey and see as it comes out. We'll have to get you back on the podcast after so you can kind of talk about um, some of those experiences. But it's been great to have you on and share your story. I think you've got a good story of kind of walking out on that limb, taking the risk, and then now getting the rewards. But it's a good story to share with people who are wondering, should I take that risk? So yeah, I appreciate you coming on the podcast. We'll definitely have to have you back if you want to someday.
Yeah, I'd like to thank you again, Alex, and your viewers, your followers. Thank you, Cobra Kai Nation, obviously, Netflix, Sony Pictures, lots of shout outs over here. I'm Kris D. Roberts. You can find me on Facebook, Kris D. Roberts 1 on Instagram. And that's pretty much the only platforms I'm running right now. So feel free. I also have an IMDb link, Kris D. Roberts, and it is Chris with a K.
Yeah, go check out his IMDb, see what he's been in. But yeah, it's been great chatting.
Excellent.
Thanks for listening. Please stay tuned for more episodes soon.